The old grandfather clock in the grand hall chimed midnight. Its deep resonant sound was the only thing that dared to disturb the oppressive silence of the manor. For 10 years this silence had been Ilara's constant companion, a heavy blanket woven from unspoken words and unshed tears. She sat in the dimly lit library, a place that had once been her only sanctuary. Tonight, it felt like a cage. Her husband, Lord Valerius, was away on business, but his presence lingered in the air, cold and controlling, like the winter frost on the window panes. Her fingers trembled as she held the small, ornate box. It was a relic from a life she barely remembered, a life before Valerius. She had found it hidden in a loose floorboard beneath her husband's grand desk, a place she was never supposed to go. Curiosity, a feeling she thought had long been extinguished, had guided her hand. Inside, nestled amongst his father's old cufflinks and signet rings, was a letter. It was not addressed to her. It was not even from this decade. The parchment was yellowed with age, the ink faded, but the words were sharp, cruel, and clear. They were written in Valerius's hand, a script she knew as well as her own name. But this was not the calculated, precise writing of the man she knew. This was the eager, triumphant scrawl of a much younger man. The letter was addressed to an old associate, a man whose name was synonymous with treachery. And as Ilara's eyes scanned the lines, the world around her began to crumble, piece by painful piece. The plan worked to perfection, the letter read. Her father is financially ruined, his reputation shattered. He will have no choice but to accept my generous offer. He will give me his daughter's hand in marriage to save his family from utter disgrace. He thinks I am his savior. He will never know I was the architect of his downfall. Ilara read the words again and then a third time. Her breath caught in her throat, a choked, desperate sound. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek, landing on the brittle paper. 10 years. 10 years of a loveless marriage, of quiet submission, of believing her family had simply fallen on hard times. 10 years of believing Valerius had been their reluctant rescuer. It had all been a lie. He had not saved her. He had orchestrated her ruin. He had destroyed her family to possess her, to own her like he owned this grand manor, like he owned the very air she breathed. The coldness in her heart, a familiar ache she had carried for a decade, was suddenly replaced by a fire. It was a small flickering flame at first, but it grew with every beat of her heart, a burning rage that promised to consume the lies that had defined her life. She looked up from the letter, her gaze falling upon a portrait of Valerius that hung above the fireplace. His painted eyes seemed to mock her, so full of confidence and control. But for the first time in 10 years, Ilara was not afraid. She was awake, and she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this secret would not remain buried. His world, so carefully constructed, was about to come crashing down. Before the silence, there was music. Before the cold stone walls of Valerius's manor, there was the warm, sun-drenched garden of Briarwood. Ilara's world had once been a vibrant tapestry of color and light. Her home was not a grand fortress, but a sprawling country house covered in ivy and surrounded by fields of wildflowers. Laughter was the melody that filled its halls, and the scent of her mother's baking was its constant, comforting perfume. Her father, Lord Alistair, was a man whose wealth was measured not in gold, but in the respect of his peers and the love of his family. He was a kind man with a gentle smile and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he looked at his daughter. He would often find her in the garden, a sketchbook in her lap, her fingers smudged with charcoal as she tried to capture the beauty of a rose or the dance of a butterfly. "You have your mother's soul, my dear," he would say, his voice full of pride. "You see the beauty in everything." Her mother, Lady Seraphina, was the heart of their home. She taught Ilara that strength was not about power, but about resilience and compassion. Together they would tend to the gardens, their hands deep in the rich earth. It was a simple life, but it was full. It was a life built on a foundation of love and trust, a foundation Ilara believed was unbreakable. And then there was Liam. He was the son of a neighboring farmer, a young man with kind eyes and a smile that could chase away any cloud. Their love was as quiet and natural as the changing of the seasons. They would walk for hours through the meadows that separated their homes, their hands clasped together. They did not speak of titles or fortunes. They spoke of a future filled with simple joys, a small cottage, a garden of their own, children with his smile and her artistic hands. With Liam, Ilara felt seen. She felt that her heart was safe. Lord Valerius was a visitor in this perfect world, a shadow that occasionally fell upon their sunlit life. He was a business acquaintance of her father, a man of immense wealth and influence from the city. When he visited Briarwood, he brought with him an air of cold ambition that felt out of place among the warm stones and blooming flowers. He praised her father's integrity with a voice as smooth as silk, yet Ilara always noticed a flicker of something calculating in his dark eyes. He would look at her, and his gaze felt possessive, as if she were a prize to be won, a beautiful object to be acquired. She would instinctively move closer to her mother, a shiver running down her spine. Her father, ever trusting, saw only a powerful new friend. He could not see the predator that lurked beneath the polished veneer. He could not see the architect of their ruin, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. The change came like a subtle shift in the wind, a cold breeze on a warm summer day. At first it was just whispers in the village, rumors that clung to the air like smoke. Then her father's business partners, men who had shared his table for years, suddenly became strangers. Shipments that were vital to their prosperity vanished without a trace. The laughter that once filled the halls of Briarwood faded, replaced by the hushed, worried tones of her parents' conversations behind closed doors. The ground beneath their feet began to crumble, slowly at first, and then all at once. Lord Alistair, a man known for his unwavering honesty, was suddenly accused of treachery and fraud. His name, once a symbol of integrity, was dragged through the mud. Creditors, like vultures circling a dying animal, descended upon their home. The threat of losing Briarwood, the very heart of their family, became a terrifying reality. Ilara watched her father, once so strong and proud, shrink before her eyes. He was a ship lost in a storm, his spirit battered by a tempest he could not comprehend. Her mother's quiet strength became a fragile shield against a world that had turned hostile and cruel. Just as the final thread of hope was about to snap, Lord Valerius arrived. He strode into their home not as a visitor, but as a conqueror disguised as a savior. He exuded an aura of power and control, a stark contrast to the despair that had settled over her family. He spoke of his deep admiration for her father, his words dripping with false sincerity. He listened to their tale of ruin with a look of feigned sympathy, his dark eyes missing nothing. Then he made his offer. It was presented not as a deal, but as an act of mercy. He would use his vast resources to silence the rumors, to settle the debts, to restore her father's name. He would save Briarwood. He would save them all. But his salvation came with a price only Ilara could pay. He wanted her hand in marriage. The room fell silent. The air grew thick with the weight of his demand. Ilara looked at her father's broken face, at the silent tears streaming down her mother's cheeks. She thought of Liam, of their sun-drenched meadows, and whispered promises. That life, that future, dissolved into an impossible dream. She was standing at a crossroads. On one path lay her own happiness, a life of love and freedom. On the other lay the survival of her family. In that moment, she understood the true meaning of sacrifice. With a steady voice that did not betray the shattering of her own heart, she looked directly at Lord Valerius. "I accept," she said. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Her father let out a sob, a sound of both relief and profound grief. Valerius simply smiled, a cold, triumphant smile that did not reach his eyes. He had won, and Ilara's world, the vibrant, beautiful world of Briarwood, had come to an end. A new life, a life as a prisoner in a golden cage, was about to begin. The gates of Valerius's estate were wrought iron and imposing, separating his world from the one Ilara had known. The manor itself was a masterpiece of cold architecture, a palace of polished marble and dark, gleaming wood. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly without warmth. As Valerius gave her a tour, he did not speak of it as their home. He spoke of it as a collection of his finest acquisitions, the priceless paintings, the ancient tapestries, and now, her. She was the final piece, the beautiful wife, to complete the picture of his success. The staff moved through the cavernous halls like ghosts, their faces impassive, their footsteps silent. They answered to him, and their efficiency was born of fear, not loyalty. From the very first day, Ilara understood she was not the lady of this house. She was merely its most prized occupant. Her life became a meticulously crafted routine, designed and dictated by her husband. He chose her dresses, elegant gowns that felt more like costumes than clothing. He curated the guest lists for their silent, formal dinners, surrounding her with people who saw her as an extension of his status. He discouraged her passions, calling her love for painting a trivial pastime, unsuitable for a woman of her new station. The sketchbooks and charcoals that had been her companions since childhood were packed away, their absence leaving a void in her soul. Her connection to her past was slowly and systematically severed. Letters from her family at Briarwood became rare, and when they did arrive, the words felt stilted and cautious. She knew Valerius was reading them, censoring any true emotion, ensuring her isolation was absolute. She was forbidden from visiting her old home, with Valerius claiming the journey was too strenuous for her delicate constitution. It was an excuse, a lie to keep her firmly within his control. She was a bird in a gilded cage, and the bars were growing thicker with each passing day. The years began to blur into one another, each one a copy of the last. The sharp, agonizing pain of her sacrifice dulled into a chronic, hollow ache. The vibrant, hopeful girl who had once sketched flowers in the sunlit gardens of Briarwood began to fade. In her place was a quiet, pale woman who drifted through the grand rooms of the manor, a ghost in her own life. She learned to build walls around her heart, to wear a mask of calm composure that betrayed none of the turmoil within. She existed, but she was no longer truly living. Hope, once a burning sun in her heart, had become a distant, flickering star, almost impossible to see in the vast darkness of her new reality. She was lost, adrift in a silent sea of wealth and loneliness, and she had all but given up on ever finding the shore. The 10th anniversary of their wedding arrived not with celebration, but with a chilling sense of permanence. Valerius marked the occasion by presenting Ilara with a diamond necklace. The stones were cold and heavy against her skin, a perfect symbol of their marriage. He fastened the clasp, his fingers brushing her neck with an indifferent touch, his eyes already on the financial reports spread across his desk. He did not wish her a happy anniversary. He simply said, "This will look appropriate at the minister's dinner party on Friday." In that moment, Ilara felt the last flicker of her youthful spirit die. She was not a wife, she was an ornament, and her only purpose was to reflect his power. Later that day, a letter arrived from her mother. The words were cheerful, but the carefully formed letters spoke of a deep, unspoken sadness. Ilara held the page, feeling the immense weight of the years, of her parents' guilt, of her own lost life. That night, the silence of the manor felt heavier than ever. She wandered into the vast, dark library, a place where she had spent countless hours trying to escape her own thoughts. She ran her fingers along the spines of the leather-bound books, each one a testament to a world of stories she could no longer feel a part of. Her fingers stopped on a small, worn volume of poetry, a book she had smuggled from Briarwood and hidden years ago. She pulled it from the shelf, its familiar weight a comfort in her hands. Sitting in the faint moonlight that streamed through the tall windows, she began to read. The words spoke of hope, of resilience, of love that could withstand any storm. They were the words of the girl she used to be, a girl who believed in such things. A single tear fell onto the page, but it was not a tear of despair. It was a tear of remembrance. And with that remembrance came a spark. A tiny, defiant ember began to glow in the desolate landscape of her heart. Fueled by a restlessness she had not felt in years, she found herself standing before the one door that was always forbidden to her, the door to Valerius's private study. He was away for the week, and a reckless impulse guided her hand to the knob. For the first time she crossed the threshold. The room was just like him, immaculate, organized, and cold. But as her eyes scanned the room, she felt a pull, a strange intuition. Her gaze fell to the floor beneath his grand desk. One of the wooden boards was slightly uneven. Kneeling down, her heart pounding, she pried it loose, and there in the darkness was a small, hidden box. Her hands trembled as she opened it and found the letter. She read the damning words, the triumphant confession of his ultimate betrayal. The hollow ache that had defined her existence for a decade was instantly incinerated by a white-hot rage. Her suffering was not a cruel twist of fate. It was a calculated act of evil. Her life had not been lost. It had been stolen. The quiet, submissive ghost of a woman was gone. In her place stood Ilara, no longer a victim, but an avenger. The fire was lit, and she would use it to burn his empire of lies to the ground. The letter was a weapon, but Ilara knew she could not wield it alone. To fight a man like Valerius, a man who built his world on a foundation of secrets, she needed allies. She needed eyes and ears within the very walls that imprisoned her. For days she moved through the manor with a newfound purpose, her senses sharp, observing the staff who had been the silent audience to her decade of sorrow. Most were too terrified of their master to ever defy him. But then her thoughts settled on Anya, the head housekeeper. Anya was an older woman, quiet and dignified, who had served in the manor since before Valerius was its lord. She was efficient and discreet, but over the years, Ilara had noticed small things. A comforting cup of tea left by her bedside after a particularly cold dinner with her husband. A freshly cut flower from the garden placed on her vanity. These were tiny gestures of kindness in a world devoid of it, small embers of humanity that Valerius had never managed to extinguish. In Anya's weary eyes, Ilara had sometimes seen a flicker of pity, of a shared and unspoken understanding. Ilara decided to take a calculated risk. She found Anya polishing silver in the deserted dining hall, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. She did not confront her with the truth immediately. Instead, she began to speak of the past, of her life at Briarwood, watching the older woman's face for any sign of betrayal. Anya listened patiently, her hands never ceasing their rhythmic work. Finally, Ilara's voice lowered to a whisper. "I have found something," she said. "Something that changes everything." With trembling hands, she took out the letter. She did not offer it, but held it so Anya could read the faded, cruel words. The housekeeper's eyes scanned the page, and her polished composure finally broke. She set the silver down with a soft click, her hands stilling. There was no shock on her face, only a deep, profound sadness, as if a truth she had long suspected had finally been given a voice. "I served his father," Anya said, her voice barely audible. "He was a good man. The son, he is a different creature altogether." She looked up, and for the first time, Ilara saw not a servant, but a confidant. "For 10 years, I have watched what he has done to you. I did not know how, but I always knew his heart was full of poison." In that moment, the barrier between the lady of the house and her servant dissolved. They were two women, united by a common enemy and a shared desire for justice. "He keeps all his important documents in the safe, behind the portrait in his study," Anya continued, her voice now firm with resolve. "He trusts no one, but he does not suspect us. Tell me what you need. I will help you." For the first time in a decade, Ilara was not alone. The first crack had appeared in the foundations of Lord Valerius's world. The grand ballroom was ablaze with the light of 1,000 candles, their flames dancing in the polished marble floors. It was the annual gala, Valerius's most important social event of the year. The most powerful figures in the city were in attendance, their laughter and chatter echoing through the cavernous space. Valerius was in his element, a king in his court, accepting praise and forging alliances. With Anya's help, Ilara had spent weeks preparing for this night. She had found the documents in the safe, just as Anya had said. The forged ledgers, the records of bribes, the letters detailing the conspiracy to ruin her father. She had her proof. She had also sent a private invitation to Sir Gideon, an old and honorable judge who had been a dear friend of her father's, a man Valerius had fooled just like everyone else. At the peak of the evening, Valerius raised his glass for a toast. He stood beside Ilara, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. "To a decade of prosperity," he boomed, his voice full of arrogance. "And to my beautiful wife Ilara, a perfect hostess and a symbol of my good fortune." The crowd applauded politely. Valerius smiled, basking in their adoration, completely oblivious to the abyss that was opening at his feet. This was her moment. Ilara stepped forward, gently removing his hand from her shoulder. Her voice, though not loud, cut through the din of the room with the sharpness of glass. "Husband," she began, her tone calm and steady. "You speak of fortune. I think your guests deserve to know the true price at which it was bought." A stunned silence fell over the ballroom. All eyes turned to her. Valerius's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "Ilara, do not make a scene," he hissed, but she ignored him, her gaze fixed on the powerful guests before her. 10 years ago," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "my father, Lord Alistair, was a respected man. But he was ruined by a cruel and calculated betrayal. He believed it was misfortune. He was wrong." She held up the yellowed letter. "This is a letter written by my husband, a letter in which he celebrates his masterful plan to destroy my father so that he could claim me and my family's land as his prize." Gasps of shock rippled through the crowd. Valerius's face turned pale with fury. "She is unwell," he shouted. "My wife is prone to fantasies." "I am not unwell," Ilara said, her voice like ice, "and I have more than just fantasies." She signaled to Anya, who stood waiting by the door. Anya came forward with a leather portfolio and began handing copies of the documents to Sir Gideon and the other stunned guests. "Here are the bank records that prove the bribes. Here are the forged contracts that led to my father's ruin. Here is the truth." As Sir Gideon read the documents, his face hardened with disgust and disbelief. The whispers in the room grew into a roar of condemnation. Valerius's carefully constructed world was shattering around him in real time. His mask of civility finally crumbled, revealing the monster beneath. He lunged towards Ilara, his face contorted with rage. "You will pay for this!" he screamed. But before he could reach her, Sir Gideon's guards stepped in his way, their faces grim. The judge stood up, his voice booming with authority. "Lord Valerius, these accusations are of the highest order. You are to be detained for immediate investigation." Valerius stared, trapped and defeated, not by an army but by the quiet courage of the woman he had underestimated for a decade. Ilara stood tall amidst the chaos, breathing in the air of freedom for the first time. The truth had been spoken, and justice was finally at hand. The night of the gala was the beginning of the end for Lord Valerius. As he was led away by the guards, his empire of deceit crumbled with every step he took. The scandal was the talk of the city, a shocking tale of a villain hiding in plain sight. His powerful friends abandoned him, eager to distance themselves from his disgrace. The co-conspirators he had paid to ruin her father quickly turned against him, offering testimony in exchange for mercy. The fortress of lies he had built over decades was dismantled in a matter of days. The trial was a formality. The evidence was irrefutable. The letter, the ledgers, the testimony of those he had wronged. It all painted a clear picture of a man consumed by greed and cruelty. Ilara sat in the courtroom, a figure of quiet dignity, as the story of her stolen life was told. She did not need to speak. The truth now unleashed spoke for her. When the verdict was read, her heart did not leap with joy. Instead, a slow, profound sense of peace washed over her. Guilty. The word was a key, unlocking the chains that had bound her for 10 long years. Valerius was stripped of everything. His name, his titles, his vast fortune. All of it was seized, a public reckoning for his private crimes. He was sentenced to a life of exile on a remote and barren estate, a punishment worse than prison for a man who thrived on power and influence. He would live out his days in the same isolation he had forced upon her, a fitting and just end. By order of the court, the marriage was annulled, erasing his name from her life as if it had never been. She was no longer Ilara Valerius, the silent wife. She was Lady Ilara of House Alistair, her family's honor and name fully restored. The courts returned all of her ancestral lands, including the one place her heart still called home. Weeks later, she stood before the familiar ivy-covered gates of Briarwood. Her parents were waiting for her, their faces etched with a decade of sorrow that was finally beginning to fade. Her father wept openly as he embraced her, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us," he whispered. "You saved our name." Ilara looked at the warm stone of the house, at the wildflowers blooming in the fields beyond. She was not the same girl who had left this place. She was stronger, forged in the fire of injustice. She had walked through the darkness and emerged into the light, not as a victim but as a survivor. She was home, and she was finally free. 5 years passed, and the seasons washed away the last lingering shadows of Ilara's past. Briarwood was reborn under her gentle care. Laughter once again echoed in its halls, and the gardens bloomed more vibrantly than ever before. It became a sanctuary, not just for her and her aging parents, but for anyone in need. Ilara, now the respected lady of House Alistair, used her family's restored fortune to create a foundation, a safe haven for those who had been wronged by the powerful, ensuring no one would have to suffer the way she did. Anya lived out her days at Briarwood, not as a housekeeper, but as a cherished member of the family. Her quiet strength was a constant, comforting presence, a living reminder of the loyalty that had helped light the way out of darkness. They would often sit together in the garden, two friends who had weathered the worst of storms, finding peace in the simple beauty of a blooming rose. One spring afternoon, as Ilara was sketching by the old stream that bordered her property, a familiar figure approached. It was Liam. He had heard of her freedom, of her return, and he had finally found the courage to see her again. His eyes were still as kind as she remembered, but they now held a deep, knowing respect for the woman she had become. They walked through the sun-drenched meadows of their youth, their steps falling into an old, easy rhythm. They did not speak of the lost years or the pain she had endured. Instead, they spoke of the future, of rebuilding, of the quiet joy found in a second chance. His love was not a whirlwind of passion, but a gentle, steady warmth, a safe harbor for her resilient heart. The story ends not with a grand declaration, but with a simple, peaceful scene. Ilara sits in her garden as the sun sets, casting a golden glow over the fields. Her sketchbook is open on her lap, its pages filled with the life and beauty she has cultivated around her. Liam is by her side, their hands resting comfortably together. A genuine smile graces her lips, a smile that reaches her eyes, now free of shadows. She was no longer a victim, no longer a survivor, but a creator. She had taken the ashes of a stolen life, and from them she had built a paradise of her own making, a testament to the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Ilara's incredible journey shows us that even after a decade of darkness, a single spark of courage can light the way to justice and freedom. Her story is a powerful reminder that the human spirit is resilient and that hope can survive even in the most desolate of places. We all face our own struggles, our own moments of feeling trapped or unheard. But stories like this give us strength, showing us that we are capable of rewriting our own destinies. We are so grateful that you joined us for this emotional journey today. If Ilara's story of courage and resilience touched your heart, we would be honored if you would take a moment to support our channel. Every story has a moment that stays with us. What part of Ilara's fight for freedom moved you the most? Was it the moment she discovered the letter, the confrontation at the gala, or her peaceful return to Briarwood? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Reading your reflections is the best part of our day, and your words create a community where we can all share in these powerful experiences. Your story and your voice matter to us. If you believe that stories of hope and justice deserve to be heard, please give this video a like. Liking the video helps us reach more people, sending this message of resilience out into the world for someone who might need to hear it today. And if you do not want to miss another chapter from our collection of life-changing stories, please subscribe to our channel and be sure to turn on all notifications. We are dedicated to bringing you narratives that inspire, move, and remind us of the incredible strength we all hold within ourselves. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being a cherished part of our storytelling family. We look forward to seeing you in the next story.